And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. Today, we are back with more team previews, heading out west to chat about the Portland Timbers. And we brought on a very special guest. It's Portland Timbers radio host, Adam Susman. Adam, how you doing, buddy?
Good. Hopefully, I'm more of a true DP signing and not a U22. The Timbers have loved the U22s in recent years, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that, but I'm doing well. Coachella Valley Invitational coming up. All those games are being streamed, so it's nice to see all of our teams play, at least
Yeah.
on the West Coast. It's mostly West Coast teams there. And I'll be broadcasting a few of those games while I'm down there.
Yeah, very, very exciting. I think when I saw that they were actually going to be broadcasting the preseason, I was like, oh my God, finally. Like
Oh,
we can,
it's a fight every year to get those games broadcasted, but I think they listen to the fans a bit more.
yeah, which is great. And they need to. I think they're realizing that too. Like we probably should maybe listen a little bit more, which is great. So we got a lot to talk about with Portland today. A lot of moves coming in, people leaving. But before we get into all of that, we always hit scarf of the week on every episode we do. I got to ask you, which one are you showing off today?
Well, if there's video here, I'm more of a jersey person than I am a scarf person, so
We can do both.
maybe you want a different guest on, but the scarf I have, whatever this is right or left, is from Christine Sinclair's last game, which was, let's see, when was that? In October of last year. Most goals ever, male or female player. I got to cover her last game at Providence Park and ask her some questions, which was honestly very cool. She's one of the biggest legends here. Jersey wise, I don't know what's fashionable right now. I'm really looking forward to all the new kits dropping, and the Timbers do a nice thing with media where they send it out to all their members to kind of review it. We've seen some images where it's kind of like a log stump that has all the rings on it, which would be pretty cool.
Ooh.
But my favorite jersey right now, I really like that pink Juventus jersey from like 2016-ish. It's a
Mhm.
Paulo Dybala jersey on the back, who was one of my
Ooh.
favorite players when I was in high school.
Nice, nice. Yeah, my brother and I are split. So I'm a scarf collector. I think I just bought another two, so I'm pushing probably close to 80 now in the
Damn.
scarf collection. My brother's a kit collector, so he's pushing like 80 kits. So we've got like this running Google sheet of scarves and kits, so we know if we're getting like a birthday
Yeah.
present, we're like, okay, we can't double up. We can't double up.
Yeah, I'm probably rocking like 25-ish kits, and
Nice.
I probably bought 20 of them from the span of like 2015 to 2000, like 17, 18, when I was like obsessed in
Yeah.
high school, and all my disposable income went to that when I didn't have rent or bills to pay. Uh, and I'm feeling old because like all of them are like retro at this point, which I guess makes them more valuable and more cool, but also ages me a bit.
Oh yeah, it's brutal. I mean, I remember I picked up my scarves from like a 2 year span when I was got my first job, and I was like, oh, they gave me adult money. That was stupid of them. Here comes every scarf I can possibly buy. So we're working on getting everything for all the MLS sides. But I'm gonna once I hit every MLS team, and I've got one for every team, it's going to be only from the stadiums that I visit. So I'm gonna try and go to different games and pick them up like in person, so they mean something instead of just saying, oh, it's another scarf. So
Yeah.
that's how I'm going to control myself from now on. I'm going to save all that money from the scarves that I buy and buy tickets to games and then buy a scarf too.
Yeah, yeah. Timbers Army does a good job with their scarves. I'm sure there's hopefully a Timbers fan or two listening to this one. So round of applause for Timbers Army because around MLS they're one of the best when it comes to the scarves and having a lot of different scarves as well.
I would have to agree because this is a top one for me. I've got my Portland Timber scarf. We did it. This is one of the first scarves I've got, and if you are an avid listener of the podcast, you know there's a threshold that needs to be met for my scarves to be cool. One of them, it means it has to be different on both sides. It has to have a cool design, and it has to meet in the middle. And this
Mm.
one is a
Yeah,
tree that meets in the middle, and I think it's the most elite thing I've ever seen. So
I'll
this is up there.
I'll give you $10 if you can name the mountain on that scarf.
Nope, no
Okay,
shot.
I mean it's probably just a generic mountain, but the big one in Oregon is Mount Hood, so I'm presuming that's what it's resembling.
Yeah, couldn't. I want to get out west. I was in Colorado for like 4 days for a wedding, and I wasn't a travel guy. Like I'm like, I don't need to travel. Like I could whatever. I went to Colorado, hiked the Rockies once. I was like, I need to go everywhere. So I've got all the big destinations on there. Mount Hood's gonna be there for sure.
Yeah, you just got to get one of the New York teams to come out to Providence Park. NYCFC was here in 2023. We're getting Cincinnati this year, which
Nice.
could be an even bigger game if a certain someone is not on the Portland Timbers.
Ooh, and if he moves to a certain Eastern Conference team.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's one of the best for if you're listening around MLS. I truly think it's one of the best grounds in the league and some of the best support.
Oh yeah, could not agree more. And we'll get into that here in a little bit because we have to apologize here. And I say we, my co-host isn't here, but we are known for picking one team a year and putting on a pretty good curse on them. We call it the podcast curse. And unfortunately, Portland were one of two teams that caught that curse last year. We predicted them to be one of the best defensive teams in the league at the start of the season. And we know how that played out. It ended up with a ninth place finish in 2024 before losing a home playing game to Vancouver very badly. What we like to say is they played proper MLS 4.0 football. They conceded just as much as they were scoring. It was all out, just tons of vibes. And unfortunately, that did not set them up for long-term success. There was a round of 32 Leagues Cup exit versus St. Louis. And now in 2025, they're going to look at Leagues Cup and US Open Cup to try and rebound from what I think was an underwhelming 2024 season. But I'd like to get your thoughts on how that season went on.
So the season-wide issue was defensively, right? There was never continuity on who the center backs were. On paper, at the start, it was Kamal Miller and Zach McGraw. McGraw fell out of favor. Dario Zuparic came in, and then Kamal Miller and Miguel Araujo, another center back, both went away for Copa America. So in Phil Neville's first season, he could just never really have a consistent center back pairing. And I like Claudio Bravo and Juan Mosquera, the two starting fullbacks for the Timbers. Both are more attacking minded than they are defensive minded. And Claudio Bravo started the season coming back from an injury that just kind of kept him behind the eight ball all season long. And there was no fullback depth, which is something the Timbers addressed this offseason a bit, bringing in Yimmer Fori from the Colombian League. The Timbers, though, like it was honestly a successful season up until like a month before it ended. And then they kind of just ran out of steam because they had a stretch of 10 games early in the year where they did not win one game. Phil Neville said this publicly, where it was a cup final mindset for almost half of the season just to try to get into the playoffs. And when you treat every game like that, which they had to, it wears on the team. And Evander, Jonathan Rodriguez, Felipe Mora, and Santiago Moreno, frankly, ran out of gas. And they were 2, 3 points away from being the 4 seed with like a month to go. And then because they ran out of steam and the goal scoring finally dried up when it had been so fruitful all season long, the defense wasn't there to back it up. And ultimately, that ended in a 9 seed finish on 47 points. And in the wild card, they got embarrassed by Vancouver. They were so defensively poor in that game. And it was certainly a bitter end to the season, which, all things considered, like if you take out that last game, which is a terrible last impression of 2024, the Timbers at least had an identity, and they did finish the season with a winning record, which was nice to see from Phil Neville.
Yeah, and I think what had happened was I liked the Phil Neville move. I know that was kind of a up in the air for a lot of people. I thought it was a good addition. I thought Miami he kind of run his course in Miami. He needed something new, a team that he could go to and kind of make his own. And we saw that back line of Crepeau, McGraw, Kamal Miller, and we're like, those are three solid, like top level MLS guys, at least in Crepeau and Kamal Miller. And McGraw was on his way up and up, and we're like, this is it, man. They're and like you mentioned, the fullbacks as well were so solid, Mosquera and Bravo, and it's like this team may be like going for the best record in the defense in all of MLS, and it just fell apart, and it fell apart hard, right? And it would have been really bad had they not had that attack to supplement it, right? Like I said, my definition was underwhelming for them, which I think kind of to me it fits.
Yeah, I think last year was also a bit of a transition year. Ned
Mhm.
Grabavoy, has his critics, but in his defense, he's had to turn over a pretty old Timbers roster from like 2021, 2022. No more Sebastian Blanco, no more Diego Valeri. Larry's Mabiala was the leader at the back. Who else? Of course, Diego Chara is still on the team, but you're also trying to overturn the nucleus of this side. And that started last year. They're really hitting home on these young players, a lot of them which have worked.
Mhm.
If you're a Timbers fan, you know about David Ashala, maybe the average MLS fan does not. The last name is spelled Ayala. Uh, Phil Neville, I don't completely agree with this, has said at times last year is one of the best midfielders in the Western Conference.
Hmm.
And if Evander is not a Timber in the 2025 season, Ayala will pick up a lot of the creative burden just from a deeper spot. He can make every pass in the book, and it will be interesting to see who the midfielder next to Ashala is for the majority of the season. Diego Chara, yes, of course, club captain, absolute legend. Every season he plays 2,500 plus minutes. At this point in his career, he's played 37,000 minutes just for the Portland Timbers. And he played, 100 games in Colombia before he even came to Portland. To put in context how long he's been around in Portland, he was the club's first DP signing in 2011. And he is still with the club going into year 15. An absolute legend. And I'm fortunate enough to be behind the scenes with him and the nicest guy in the world.
Oh
Absolute
yeah,
nicest
I've
guy in the
only heard
world.
great things about him.
And,
Only
and
heard
it
great things.
and it's true. He gives the fans the time of day as well. But yeah, last year was underwhelming.
Yeah,
And Evander made up for 52% of the team's goals last year. So if he's not there, that's a big hole to fill. And there's some guys that are going to pick up the slack, yes, but you think, and this is no insider info, this is just like how I theorize it. If Evander's not there, they were the fifth best offense in the league last year. Let's say they drop down to 15. If they can go down 10 spots in offense, but go up 10 spots in defense, they can still be a playoff team. And if Evander is gone, they're going to get a good chunk of change and likely to reinvest that into a new number 10.
yeah, and we're gonna talk all about additions and losses and all of this here in a second. But I do want to tell one story about Diego Chara before we move on. And we had interviewed Omir Fernandez from Colorado to start off this season, season six, and we asked him, "Who's the toughest player that you've ever played against?" And he goes, "Dude, my first year, like coming out of Red Bull 2, playing for the first team for the first time, I was playing as a 10 for who was the coach at the time? I think he said it wasn't Troy, it was Chris Armas. Chris Armas put him there. And he goes, Chris told me I was going to play the 10. And I'm brand new in the league. I don't know anybody. So I look across and I see this guy. He's like 5'6". He got his jersey tucked in. I'm like, oh, he's got old school number six vibes. I'm quick. I'll go right around him. Man, I tried to get around this guy, and he scissor tackled me from behind. I look up, Diego Chara standing over me, like, "Who do you think you are?" And he just jogs away, and I go, "That was my welcome to MLS moment." And I go, "Yeah, I feel like that is everybody's like, oh, that's Diego Chara."
Yeah, he's a tank that never empties. And he's not as box to box as he used to be. He's more of just a number six than maybe a number eight like he was 5, 10 years ago.
Mhm.
But he's still a top DM. Like he can
Oh yeah,
still absolutely hold his own at 38 years old.
which is insane, especially the way the league has
Yeah.
progressed. But listen, we've talked a lot about some of the new. We already name dropped a couple of the new players coming in, but who would you say is the best addition they've made so far?
So the most expensive addition they made was Kevin Kelsey, but I think the best addition they made is João Ortiz. He's a starter for the Ecuadorian national team. If you look at his player profile, you think, oh, this is a Diego Chara replacement, but he's kind of a hybrid between Ashala and Diego Chara, and his passing numbers suggest he's more than just a destroyer. And listening to his speak through a translator at his opening press conference, he is a true box to box midfielder, which I didn't think the Timbers had. And you insert him into the lineup, he gives you more defending in midfield than you otherwise previous had. And I also think this is another theory. The Timbers have only played in a three back throughout preseason. I asked Phil Neville about it. He said it's through necessity. They literally do not have a number 10 right now, with Evander being in Brazil and waiting for a move or potentially coming back closer to the season. And Santiago Moreno, who would be his backup number 10, is dealing with a minor injury, so he's not in preseason. And the backup number 10 last year was Eric Williamson, who got sold to Charlotte. So the Timbers have been playing a 3-4-3 because of it. And I think Ortiz actually fits that system pretty well. Him and Ashala in midfield, or Ortiz and Diego Char. He's a great signing because he can start, of course. He's 28 years old in his prime, but he also offers backup to either Ashala or Diego Chara. he's not a specialized player that can only play the role of one of the two. So he allows you to play with just two traditional midfielders, or if Phil Neville goes back to the 4-2-3-1, which he played for 95% of last year, he could play one of the spots in the double pivot. So I'm high on him. Kevin Kelsey is one for the future, but 6 million is not cheap. You're going to want production out of that right away. And even if he is coming off the bench in year one, which I largely presume he will, he offers such a different outlook than Felipe Mora. And finally, an aerial threat for the Timbers, which they have not had in attack since, what, Fernando Adi? It's been a while.
It is a
Uh,
while. That is a way
so,
long way back.
so having Kevin Kelsey there is valuable.
Yeah, I am in full agreement with you. I think Kevin Kelsey's going to get the bright lights and the ooh big U22 $6 million, right? But I loved the profile of Joe Ortiz when I was doing this little bit of research, and I always thought that Williamson was kind of that, and this may be just the outsider looking in, but I always thought Williamson was kind of that eight hybrid that you needed in that role. And I thought, the injuries, of course, held him back. I mean, heartbreaking that just year after year after year. So I think that is the more, again, from my point of view, the replacements for Williamson and a healthy Williamson where he can slide in, and like you mentioned, he can replace those two players, but I think he brings more what Williamson would do than anything else, which I think is what, again, from an outsider's point of view, I think that's what Portland was missing last year, was
Yeah.
just somebody to be able to shuttle, right? And
Yeah.
Ortiz got a ton of experience through like lots of high levels, Libertadores, Sudamericana, like really high South American level, which is perfect for where he's going.
Yeah, if Moises Caicedo wasn't starting a spot for the Ecuadorian national
Right.
team, João Ortiz is probably getting a few more caps than he otherwise has had. And I think Eric Williamson is a pretty different player than João Ortiz. Eric Williamson, he was a really good dribbler. Like, in terms of ball progression, really strong. But for a team that struggled defensively, sometimes Williamson's mistakes in midfield or even his own defensive third would create high-end opportunities for the opposition. I think Ortiz is a bit more safe, but that is what the Timbers need in midfield, honestly.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, you're not in a position to take risks, unfortunately. But listen, players coming in are great, but obviously players have gone, and some players have yet to leave, but is heavily rumored to not be going. Biggest loss or biggest potential loss? I'll let you go either one.
So there is a graphic going around that was the Timbers have the most returning minutes of any team in MLS.
Ooh,
And is that a good or a bad thing? It's good because continuity, and we're in a league that changes so much year to year. More than one third of MLS has a new head coach. The Timbers still, of course, retain Phil Neville and his entire coaching staff. Good continuity there. All the same center backs. That could be good for continuity, but it could also be bad because it wasn't a great unit last year. In terms of the toughest addition, toughest player to go out, like if it's a Vander, that's the obvious answer. The Timbers haven't really lost much. They lost Eric Williamson, and other than that, no real first team contributors. Marvin Laria is out the door. I guess Dairon Asprilla, who left in the summer, was a pretty big loss just in terms of like a culture guy and someone who always came up big in the biggest moments. But other than that, like their players they lost are Eric Williamson, who was a backup midfielder who is coming off back-to-back torn ACLs. I wish him the best. Super great guy in Charlotte. They lost Mason Toy, who they brought in mid-season. He's with Sporting KC now. He had a back injury pretty quick into his Timbers tenure and wasn't really able to prove himself. Lost Marvin Laria, who was a backup winger, replaced him pretty adequately with Ari Lassiter. So if I have to answer on the multiple choice test, I would say Eric Williamson just because he's a very unique profile. But if Evander is not a Timber, that's of course the biggest loss a team in MLS can perhaps suffer.
yeah, yeah, couldn't agree more. And that's pretty much what I thought. I had prepped this with the expectation he'd be gone by now, but since he isn't, of course he is, right? The dude, he's an MVP finalist in 2024, and that's not by accident, right? That's not he didn't pay anybody to get there. He properly balled out, and that's a tough, and I think it's a tough way for his career to end, to be kind of like it feels sour, just from the way the media is putting it out there. It feels like it's sour. Like I don't think he deserves that after what has gone through. And again, I don't know all the behind the scenes. I don't know if, what he's saying about them not giving him a fair deal or what have you. I don't know if any of that's true. But again, it doesn't feel right that that's how this is going to be portrayed as being ending. Like that the ten, it being severed like that, you know?
Yeah, I'll talk about it from like the fan base's perspective, and I can share a bit of what I
Hmm.
know on Evander. Of course, after the 5-0 loss to Vancouver, he pretty publicly called out the club on social media. Phil Neville and Ned Grabavoy answered to it. Ned Grabavoy is the Timbers GM.
Yeah.
They answered to it 2 days later and didn't mince their words. They kind of went back at Evander. Evander talked about promises that were not withheld by the club. I won't get into those specifically. So his problem is not really with Phil Neville or any other player on the team. He's only been in Portland 2 years, and he has had aspirations of getting back into the Brazilian national team squad. Maybe the hardest team to get in the world,
Yeah.
especially from an attacking position. But Brazil's most recent head coach has said they want to start promoting more from the domestic league. So Evander sort of started an eye move back to Brazil. But the Timbers still have him under contract, and they offered him a contract which would make him the wealthiest player in Portland Timbers history, which he deserves to be. It would pay him kind of like Denny Bouanga range, like sixth, seventh highest paid player in the league. And the relationship has just continued to sour. He hasn't reported back to preseason. I asked Phil Neville about it last week. He does have his green card. It was initially an excused absence. Now he has his green card as of last week, and he could theoretically be playing with the Timbers at Coachella Valley. He has said in the past on a different podcast and back in his native Brazil that he will honor his contract. I don't know how true that still is. We'll see. A lot of this is depending, and this is just putting the puzzle pieces together on what happens with Acosta from Cincinnati. Because if Cincinnati gets a lot of money for Acosta, they can reinvest that into a player in the same position in Evander. And the Timbers can use that funds they get from Evander to perhaps buy another number 10. But he's a player that contributed to 52% of the Timbers' goals last year. I think he was tied with Acosta for most goal contributions in MLS a season ago and had the most prolific offensive season the Timbers have ever seen, and that's including an MVP Diego Valeri season back in 2017. He's not a bad guy. I'm not saying Evander and I are friends, but I interview him once every other week. I talk to him off record every now and then. He liked being in Portland. He liked the Timbers fans. Always gave me the time of day, and I think kind of came out of his introverted shell a bit that we saw in the 2023 season in the 2024 campaign. Was an all-star, was third in MVP voting. No matter the funds you get for that player, it's always going to be tough to recoup. So I don't know. I don't know the resolve. Phil Neville said there's going to be a quick resolution on Monday. We're recording this on Thursday. I reported that still nothing has really come out, and I think you kind of have to wait for the Acosta domino to fall to see if the Evander one will as well.
Yeah, and then maybe they have a hard stop. Like, if you're not, if Cincinnati's not going to make the move, then we're not going to go to you. We'll go somewhere else, which would be interesting to play out. I think that's another cool wrinkle that comes in with the cash for players thing, but that's another conversation completely. Listen, if he doesn't come back, or even with some of the players that aren't, coming back at all, there may be a spot for players to step up and break out. And I was wondering if you had somebody to keep an eye on, player to watch from Portland for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, it's a young team, so you'd hope it's a few options. One that I look at, a player that was, putting it lightly, inconsistent last year, but the high end was really high, is Anthony. He's a young Brazilian winger who, when he's on, I mean, it's incredible. He is super fast. He's got a good build, long stride. Problem is, he doesn't really have a weak foot. He really favors his right foot, and if you watch him when he's playing on the left, he likes to cut in on it, and when he's playing on the right, he favors it. I'll give him this. The Timbers struggled defensively last year, not primarily because their forwards didn't defend much, but it was an aspect. Evander, Jonathan Rodriguez, Felipe Morris, Santiago Moreno, incredibly talented attacking players, but didn't really help out defensively. Anthony, though, when he did start, which was a lot of games, he was good defensively. And I'm not, look, media was open. I'm not breaking anything from Phil Neville on Monday. The Timbers have been playing in a three back, and Anthony's been the right wing back. And that's a position that I think could be really good for him because he is that fast. He is strong. He does have a defensive acumen. His crossing needs to get a little bit better, but I'm calling the Timbers game on Saturday versus the Chicago Fire Coachella Valley Invitational. I'm pretty sure they're going to come out in a three back again, and having Anthony there is cool. In games last year where they were trailing by a goal, they would often bring in Anthony as a right back to kind of just have that attacking aspect. So he's someone that I think just on a basic sense will have a larger role for just a young player getting another year in Phil Neville's system. But if he's playing that right wing back, I'm really excited to see what it looks like. Because sometimes his finishing product is what lets him down, but his build up and getting there is always really strong. Like in terms of progressive carries, he's right up there.
Mhm.
Passing can be a little bit better, but having a competition at right wing back between Anthony and Juan Mosquera, iron sharpens iron. And then on the other
Yeah.
side of it, you have Yimmer Fori, who played as a left wing back the last year at Independiente in Colombia. He's suited for that position as well as Claudio Bravo, who's more attacking than he is a defensive fullback.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I think it's a good shout. The only reason I couldn't pick it is because I picked that last year, and we tried not to double up when we
Well,
do
the
this.
first game, he looked real good when he had,
Oh,
what, 2 goals and an assist.
I'm telling you, we predicted that, and he put that up. I'm like, I'm a genius. I
You
know
won.
ball. I know. Just pay me MLS. And then the rest of the season was the rest of the season. But we don't talk about that. We want to talk about the good stuff here. For me, it's going to be Kevin Kelsey, right? And not because he's not so much known, like a not known name. I think people in MLS should vaguely know who he is, but they spent big boy money on this guy, right? So I think that he's going to have to deliver regardless of what role he's in. So I'm sure that they spent on him and said, okay, in this, you are going to be maybe a reserve player, like you mentioned, coming off the bench, but we still expect you to have X amount of goals, right? I wouldn't expect you to spend that much money to be like, oh yeah, do whatever you want for the first 2 years until we're ready to move you on. And then you're going to be the guy. So I think that he still has some expectation he needs to hit. And I think with Evander possibly, probably, maybe gone, I think that's going to be tough too, because if he has no service, that's going to be tough for him to do because he's very good in the air, like you mentioned. But if you don't get that sort of service, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, Kelsey's definitely the attacker of the future for Portland.
Mm-hmm.
And look, knock on wood, Felipe Mora's been an injury-prone player in the past. He's had like major lower body injuries. In 2022, he played 78 minutes total. In 2023, he played 800, only started 8 games. Last year, it was awesome to see. He
Mm-hmm.
played 29 games, started 22, had 14 goals and 6 assists. An incredible season. A lot of that is kind of down to Evander, making a lot of chances his life a little bit easier. But Kevin Kelsey's gonna get chances, whether it's playing with Mora or on his own at the end of games. With young players, and this can kind of go to our Anthony conversation as well. I've heard this from a few coaches that you have to stomach the inconsistency as long as the high end of the pendulum is still there. And Kevin Kelsey has shown the high end, kind of like Anthony has as well. And you just hope that what you see from those high end flashes can become more of a normality than every now and then. And Kelsey to start the 2024 season as a 19-year-old, he was the highest scoring teenager in MLS last year, largely because Diego Luna was 20. But Kelsey, he scored 5 goals in his first 11 games for Cincinnati. And you're thinking, oh my God, we got a gem here. Goal every other game at 19 years old for a good team. That's great. And then for the final 14 games, he scored 1 goal. So that goes a little bit to the inconsistency. He fell out of favor. And glass half full, you can say, look, Cincinnati signed Denke for 17 million. Of course, they're not going to trigger their buy option from Shakhtar Donetsk, and I think that is the actual answer on why
Mm-hmm.
they didn't pick him up. But also, he didn't have a great end to the year.
Right.
Still made the MLS 22 under 22. Was actually in the starting 11 for that. So the accolades are there. But the Timbers did place a high value on him getting that 1 year of MLS experience already. Because how many times do we see a player come, need that first year to adjust, and then year two kind of pop off and explode? Happened with
Oh yeah.
Evander.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. And Kelsey is so young that like he's 6, 7 years away from his prime. Where from a business aspect too, if this works, the Timbers can make a lot of money. Like you
Yeah.
just think about like he's about the same age that John Duran was, who when he joined Chicago. And if Kelsey can really be that guy, like they can make a good chunk of change on him. But I shouldn't say that before he's even kicked a regular season ball for Portland. I'm really excited to see him. 6'4", aerially dominant, and he's not like lanky and awkward for his size. I've watched obviously all the clips and I've seen him at training. and I'll get to broadcast him this weekend against Chicago and then San Diego the following Wednesday. He's very fluid for being 6'4", and something about being a lefty brings me some joy as well.
Yeah, that he's got all the tools there, so it's just going to be interesting to see how he pops up for that. So as we get into 2025, there's still tons of question marks hanging over the team. What's the one big question you still have and are keeping an eye on?
Evander aside, well, actually, it relates. Where's the creativity coming from?
Mhm.
Like, if Evander's not there, who's creating the chances? Is it going to be a new number 10? Is Santiago Moreno going to, you know, switch from a right winger to a number 10, which he has done in the past? It is who's going to put all those opportunities on Felipe Mora's plate. Jonathan Rodriguez, I'm not worried about.
Mhm.
Like, in a weird way, like, he's a great player, but he doesn't add much to the team besides goal scoring, which is the most important thing in soccer, so you can overlook it. There was games last year where it was like, oh, he's having a bad game, and you look up and he's got 2 goals. But it's creativity because Evander was the creative hub of this team. You play a 4-2-3-1 when you have a number 10 like Evander. And if they don't have him, they might be playing a 3 at the back. Ashala can do some of the creative burden, but a lot of it's going to have to come from the right wing. A lot of it's going to have to come from Kevin Kelsey or Felipe Mora and build up. And if you look at their successful passes per 90, Felipe Mora and Kevin Kelsey are not it. Like they're low down that list. And it can hopefully change, but it would be creativity and then just also having some continuity on the back line. Like it just has to be better. Like you have to be in the top 15 if you want to be a playoff team. I think only Colorado, I think we're outside of it who made end up making the playoffs. I may be corrected on that, at least in the Western Conference. I know
And,
that's a
and
fact.
we saw how that worked.
And we saw how that worked. They got boat raced. So the Timbers had a lot of games last year where they would just give up 3, 4 goals, and it doesn't matter how good they are offensively. I think the game that epitomized Portland best was their first game back from Leagues Cup, a 4-4 draw with St. Louis, where every time St. Louis would score, the Timbers would go. And then 2 minutes after they restart the game, St. Louis would score again. And it's just like, I don't exactly know what the Timbers' identity is going to be in 2025, despite having the same head coach and despite having the most minutes back of any team. And maybe that's a good thing because they didn't make the playoffs last year. And Phil Neville loves to say that it's 90% mentality and 10% tactics.
Mhm.
But we love talking about the tactics, so sometimes we'll gash him for that statement. But being around Phil and, hearing about his management style, he absolutely has the locker room. He absolutely has the respect of all those players. A lot of them watched him at Manchester United, watched him at Everton. He has been in the spotlight since he was 18 years old. And while, look, his Miami tenure wasn't great, he definitely makes good halftime adjustments in partnership with his assistant coaches. And the Timbers, if you're a Portland fan, you know this. Go back to Giovanni Severez or go back to Caleb Porter. The first 2, 3 months of the season, the Timbers essentially throw away every year. And it's been so frustrating to watch. I don't think it was by choice last year by any means, but when 1/3 of the league has a new head coach and you don't, you need to get off to a fast start.
Right.
Because you think about, Austin, who spent 25 million, that's going to take some time to mesh. Portland catches them the second game of the season at home. You need to win that because you're likely going to be battling for those, 4 through 8 playoff spots with the likes of an Austin or a St. Louis or a Vancouver who you play in the opener. The Western Conference, I think, is pretty open, and the teams that finished below Portland strengthened more in the offseason, at least to date. Like, I think St. Louis is going to be pretty good. What Austin did impressed me. Bruce Arena is perhaps the biggest one signing you can make, even though he's
Correct.
not a player, just in terms of a floor raiser. And then they get back their starting goalkeeper, their best center back, and add 2 all-star caliber players in Martinez and Chicho Arango. So the teams that finish below them have recouped well. So the Timbers use the continuity to their advantage. They need to in the first month or two of the year.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of comes off of mine as well, was that, last year the Galaxy, we were not thrilled on them. because their back line was as suspect. We anticipated their back line to be as suspect as Portland's actually was. And LA proved that a good defense starts with a killer attack. If you've got the
Hmm.
ball, you don't have to worry about your defenders doing anything because you have the ball. So my question is kind of like, is Portland going to try and play like that this year, where they really, unless they're rolling dice on saying, okay, it's just a one off, and Crepeau's going to come back to form, Miller's going to come back to form, McGraw's going to come back to form, whatever, and they really haven't done anything outside of the left wing back. Are they going to try and say, okay, we're just gonna own the ball without a Vander now, and we're just going to try and own the ball and do what LA did? Like, what does that shape look like? So I agree with you there that that's kind of one of the big questions.
I don't think so. I think with the additions that they've made and going in the youth direction, this
Mhm.
team almost lends itself more to playing on the counter, to playing on the break. They've gotten a lot faster, which I think is important because this was not a fast team by any means last year.
Mhm.
Evander would sometimes have to create these chances when the team was in a lower block. Now, Antony having a larger role, Finn Surman, who we haven't talked about much to this point, is a full New Zealand international. He's played like 10 games for them already at 21 years old. He's somebody that if Kamal Miller or Dario Zuparic let up, Finn Surman's biting at their heels to get in. And he played perhaps the best game any center back played last year for the Timbers in a Cascadia Cup clinching match against Seattle on I think it was the penultimate game of the season. He's dealing with a minor injury right now, so you won't see him at Coachella likely, but he'll be ready for the opener. And he's someone that has high expectations at 21 years old, coming over from the A League in the summer. So they're just faster. And João Ortiz there in the midfield, faster than Diego Chara, faster than David Ishala. Kevin Kelsey, while he's more of a physical presence, also real fast. Even as a backup option, Ari Lassiter, just having some good MLS experience, also fast. Yimmer Fori, watch his highlights. He's a left wing back coming from Colombia, also 22 years old. It could be fun if they play a three back because he is like, I think he's like 6'2", which is big for that position.
Yikes.
He is strong and he is fast. So I think you can kind of see a theme building here with how Ned Grabavoy wants to turn over this roster. And when you think of the good Giovanni Savarese teams, they would beat teams on the counter. And I think they might be going in that direction again. And frankly, they might not have much of a choice if Evander isn't there.
Yeah, that gives me Mosquera vibes. 6'2", fast, strong, white wingback. I like that. Listen, so lots of vibes there. Right? You kind of got me a little bit hyped there, with the way that you were describing the way that they're going to play and how they can be successful. But it's time to put that to a tangible number. Where is this team finishing? And I'll give you a range. You can give it in a range too.
The high end is like fourth, fifth. I just think there's teams that are better than them. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, they've lost significant players, but I still kind of pencil in the LAs. I hate to say this. I think Seattle on paper right now is better than Portland. But historically, do you know, like the last time Seattle beat Portland, I have to go to my Twitter to find the exact. It's been well over 2,000 days. The
That's
last time
crazy.
Seattle beat Portland. I think I was like in my first year of college. It was 2018 or
That's wild.
2017, the last time that the Timbers lost to Seattle. They own Lumen Field. They just dominate Seattle up there. But other than that, like if they avoid that early season sluggish start, which I think they can do this year, my prediction would be sixth or seventh. They cannot miss the playoffs. As crazy as it sounds, this is the longest stretch. Like this is probably the worst stretch of Portland Timbers in MLS. Like they came into the league in
Hmm.
2011. They had a bad first year, which is to be expected for an expansion side. Pretty good year two. 3 4 years in, they won MLS Cup. Like it was a quick ascent. And then, 16, 17, they were pretty good. Diego Valeri won MVP in 17. They were making the playoffs in both those years. Uh, and then they made MLS Cup again in 2018. And then they made MLS Cup again in 2021. And they won MLS's back during COVID.
I was hoping you weren't going to forget that. That's very, very important.
But, you know, from 2014 to 2021, there was only, it might have been 2015 to 21. There was only two teams that represented the Western Conference. It was Portland and Seattle. Portland is a premier team in Major League Soccer over the last decade. And considering the fact they have not played a playoff game since losing MLS Cup in 2021, needs to be more known. Like
Yeah.
this is a team that, yeah, they've had a turnover and older roster, which I give Ned Grabavoy credit for, but they missed the playoffs by 1 point in 2022. They missed the playoffs by 1 point in 2023, and they got crushed in the wild card last year. It's been 3 years without a playoff appearance, let alone a playoff win. Look, it's not like the Chicago Fire, who haven't won it since 2009, but in terms of the expectations of this franchise, of Soccer City USA, which has experienced success, which has brought hardware to the club, which has legendary players in MLS like Diego Valeri and Diego Chara, it's got to get back to getting in the playoffs and getting to round 2 or 3 because we haven't seen it since 2021.
Yeah, I think it's going to be 4 years. I'm going to be honest with you. I think you're
It's
going
all
for a lot
right.
more. I'm going to be the bad guy here. I think that the defense takes a step up because I don't think they can go any less. But I don't know if the attack is going to be as good without Evander or an Evander replacement. Like I just think that that was such a big part of them. And he, like you said, 52% of goal contributions coming from his foot or head or chest or whatever, right? I think that that has such a big impact that this year is going to be tough for them. Next year is going to be very, very good for them. So I have them between 11 and 15 right now because somebody has to end up being there. And I think
Yeah.
they may just be there. I like what a lot of other teams have done. And I will preface this by saying this is February 6th at 9:08 p.m. Eastern time. There is a lot of transfer window left. There's a lot of stuff that can go and change. But right now, with the way the roster is built, I've got them 11 to 15.
Yeah. I think every offseason we look at the additions and probably overvalue them and think all additions are going to hit. And I do that as well. Like, fact of the matter is, like, 1 every 3 guys you bring in is just not going to work out. It happens with DPs, it happens with U22s all the time. I think Portland actually having somewhat of a settled squad should help them,
Mm-hmm.
but the top end talent might not be there if Evander's not there.
Right.
Jonathan Rodriguez is not a young man. Felipe Mora is not a young man. But I do like what you're saying, where like one more year of this melting pot together,
Yes.
and then going into 2026, which like I don't want to think about because that's too far away, and I'm
Right.
excited for the 2025 season. But yeah, that makes sense. That's a good point by you.
Yeah.
Let me ask you that. Let me ask you this: who do you think is like worse than Portland in your opinion if you have them in that 11 to 15 range?
Okay. So this is going to be outing a lot of people. I don't love Dallas. I
I don't
I I,
either.
I don't love RSL. I don't like what they've done. And I was changed by we did RSL with Matty Casey from Royal Riot, and he changed me. I had RSL like bad, 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 and he's changed me. Um, I think that there are other teams in the West that could be down
I
in
would
that
have
basement.
I would have SKC below Portland.
See, SKC, I had them also very low, and I think they're still there. But those two moves that they made, I feel like they always make just like one or two big moves, right? Gotti King to Alan Polito, and
Yeah.
second in the West, right? Now they got Manu Garcia and Guy, who I am not going to try and pronounce his name. He is, they played from the same team. They're coming over together. Could that be, the change? I don't know. So I'm not sure about SKC, but I would agree with you that they could be there for sure.
Hmm.
Where did I
Yeah,
have them?
there's just so many wild cards in MLS, and that's
Yes.
what makes it great is the parity in the league. Like the preseason rankings we have are gonna look idiotic in 2 months, and
Terrible.
maybe we'll get some right and some wrong. But you think about a team like, look, Colorado won the wooden spoon, and then we're in the playoffs.
Yeah. I've also got Vancouver down low. Vancouver's not doing so hot for me right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I just don't know. I really
Yeah.
just don't
And
know about
and you
that team.
can. And you can.
But like, yeah, Vancouver has a DP spot open. They just got rid of Stuart Armstrong. Totally new coaching staff. Ryan Gauld is a timber killer. No
Oh,
team plays better
yeah.
against Portland than him, and he was unbelievable in that wild card game. But like Brian White and Ryan Gauld lift your four a little bit, but
Yep.
they're in the process of like selling the team.
Well, and that's what Michael was saying. We had Michael from AFTN on. He was like, "There's no investment for a reason,
Yeah.
right? Like we've got an open DP spot. It don't matter. So you don't know what they're going to do. And like I said, the West is just, and I think the West all over the place has gotten really, really good. Like there are going to be very good teams who miss the playoffs this year
Yeah.
because we said it last year. The East was a bloodbath. The West is going to be very tough this year.
So I'm broadcasting two San Diego games this
Mhm.
weekend, so I've really gotten into them. Their attack, like their front three, if they stay fit, is like good, like really good. Chucky Lozano, their other DP on the right wing, his name is it's pronounced like Trier. It's spelled
Mhm.
Dreyer,
Yeah, it's
but
like
it's like
drier, but it's
yeah,
Trier.
Trier.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like really good. If you look at the numbers that he's put up in Europe,
Mhm.
unbelievable. And then they have Ingevartsen at striker, who has
Yeah,
scored in every stop he's went in Europe, and he's like 27.
yeah.
And they're signing like Chucky Lozano is like 29, 30. Trier is like 29, 30 as well, and Ingevartsen is 27. So they have a front three that is just coming in their prime. Their midfield and defense, I don't know. Like,
Right.
but I think
That's what
yeah,
doesn't sell me on them.
yeah. No, I don't think they're gonna pull a St. Louis.
No, no.
But I didn't think St. Louis was gonna pull a St. Louis.
Very true.
But it's gonna be. I don't think San Diego's gonna be like a Cincinnati in their first 2 years. I think they're going to be worse than, like a wild card team, but I think they're going to entertain. And if you're
Sure.
an MLS fan, which you are listening to this podcast, you're going to see a lot of them early on. Apple is broadcasting like in their premiere slot, San Diego, like 5 of their first 7 weeks. So they're really
Nice.
going to sell them early on. And they're playing the Galaxy in that first month. They're playing LAFC in that first month and a half. So you're going to get used to San Diego on your screens.
Yeah, I love it. It's always going to be a fun time. But Adam, thanks so much for being here. I really enjoyed having this chat. I think it really opened a lot of people's eyes to the players that are coming in and what this team may look like. I want to give you a quick minute to plug all your socials, tell people where to find you.
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Twitter. I cover the team on a regular basis. Adam_Susman, Susman. I may or may not have a podcast in the works with a fellow guy who not works for the Timbers, but is a big Timbers supporter and works for a national outlet. It's going to be called the Timber Review. So the first little teaser is already out there, and then we're going to do a
Nice.
season preview and a match one preview versus Vancouver coming before the kickoff on Sunday, the 23rd. And if you have a Timbers game coming up in your life, be sure to message me on Twitter. I can tell you a bit more about the team. And then also, I host the radio pregame and postgame for the team 1 hour before kickoff and usually about an hour for the postgame on 750 the game if you want to listen online. Also, Blue Sky, I do that now. Adam-Susman. I couldn't get the underscore. But yeah, I'm really excited for the season. Do I dare say MLS is a better league when Portland is good? Yes, I do, because I think that's a fact. It's Soccer City, USA for a reason. Portland's the biggest city in America that only has one of the four major sports, being the Trailblazers. We don't have hockey, we don't have baseball, we don't have NFL, so we love our Timbers and Thorns.
Absolutely, guys, go show them the love. It's great content, great coverage, and I'm really excited. I saw the teaser. I'm really excited for that pod. I like the team specific that have that tied to the team and are able to get some of that information. So I will definitely be checking some of that out. I've also got September 13th, 2025 circled when our wonderful, wonderful mighty Red Bull head will head over to Providence Park. So I will be keeping an eye on that one as well. If you guys are new here, we are doing 30 teams in 15 days, I think is the way it's running. So if you want a preview of all the MLS teams, give us a follow as well. So thank you so much for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.